Is that all right? Thank you. So we are in political awareness. So if I do start to shut a conversation down, it's not because I'm anti-democratic. Indeed, it's the opposite. So, when I look at the agenda, which is lots of presentations of some really important stuff, I'm not sure I don't think it'll be a problem, and we have no questions from members of the public. So I think we should be okay. So welcome. I said I've got apologies from Oliver, but I won't go through the other apologies. I've got a large number. Any declarations of interest to be shared over and above what we normally have? I'll take silence to be assent. And minutes of the meeting on the 21st of March, are they okay? Again, I'll take silence to be agreement if that's okay. And we have no questions from the public, so we'll move on to that agenda item. And we go to agenda item 5. We've done a lot of conversations about young people, Children and Young People Alliance, and we thought it'd be really helpful to get a presentation today. Who's leading? Is Nicola? Are you doing it? You leading? Yeah. Someone needs to lead me. God knows. Nicola, can I hand over to you? And I know people. If you can introduce everybody, but I'll hand over to you. Is that all right? Grand. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I've met most people before, but I'm Nicola Ennis. I'm the Children and Young People's Alliance Programme Director. And with me today is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Chantel Park, and I work for ChiliPet, which is Children and Young People's Empowerment Project.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ruth Brown, Chief Executive at Sheffield Children's and the SRO for Children's and Young People Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the specific focus today, we're going to talk about the Children's Health Equity Collaborative. But I just want to take you back to when we came here in March and gave you an overview of the Children and Young People's Alliance, specifically highlighting the interconnections between the Joint Forward Plan and the ICP Bold Ambition for Children and Young People. And we touched a little bit on the Child Health Equity Collaborative then, and at that point I said it would be brilliant if we could have some young people in the space to talk about it as well. But due to exams and tomorrow's Children and Young People's Alliance conference, where we have lots of young people attending, we've not managed to do that in the space today, but really keen to do that after we've had our conference, because there'll definitely be a what next from that, and it would be great to come into the space and talk about that then. If you move on to the next slide, please, and I'll just say, so for today, the plan is to talk about the Child Health Equity Collaborative, the interconnections between that and the Bold Ambition and the Joint Forward Plan priorities for children and young people, and where we've got to so far with this. We've been working on this collaborative for around 1.5 years. And also really to highlight the involvement of children and young people in this space, particularly, and around the intervention. So we're going to test an intervention with the work that we've done so far. Next slide, please. So you will remember in our last conversation that there were some comments made from the board about the work of the Children and Young People's Alliance, and some comments particularly around making sure that we are connected and with place. I think the way that the comments were positioned, it made me difficult. It made it quite hard for me personally to respond at that time. But what I did go back and reflect on the comments and think is actually absolutely right. And what I should have said at that time is all the work that happens for children and young people to make a difference happens in place. And what the system space for the Alliance does is be able to support some of that work in terms of the Joint Forward Plan, NHS England's transformational priorities, and work together to be able to deliver some of those. Some people help support it and others help deliver it. So I should have said that at the time, I didn't. So I just want to make that really clear for today. And particularly the example of the Children's Health Equity Collaborative has been one of absolute partnership across all of our places. And the only way that we could be part of this was initially to make sure that our Directors of Public Health, Directors of Education, Director of Children's Services, the ICP, all were happy for us even to apply for this before we started. So that was the initial stage of where we got to. And you'll see in that summary slide there that talks almost about being greater than the sum of our parts. We know that we want to make sure that there's equity for our children and young people across South Yorkshire. And therefore, that is really why people really wanted to come on board and be part of this system work. So next slide, please. So what is it? Well, the vision is to inspire a guaranteed basic state of health and well-being for all children, regardless of circumstance, and to think about that aim across the integrated care system to have equal weight for children and young people's health creation. And I think I spoke last time about it's really difficult to be able to get that for children and young people. So this helps elevate that, and not just at place and its system, but also nationally. This is a national piece of work. And you'll see the partners there in the bottom. So this is a big partnership piece of work with Barnardo's, with the Institute of Health Equity, Cheshire Merseyside, large system, Birmingham and Solihull, another really large system, and then South Yorkshire, part of it too. Next slide, please. So we had specifically 3 programmes of work that all interconnect with each other to deliver on. So one was to create a child health equity framework. One was to look at a health dynamic measuring tool for our data. And then one was to test out the interventions in the 2nd and 3rd year, which is where we're at the moment. I'm just going to talk through a little bit about the bits that we've managed to achieve so far. Next slide, please. So you will see, so that's what it looks like. So we actually have a published child health equity collaborative framework. It is one of those frameworks where you've got it, but you need to keep on changing it depending on what's happening at the time. But for now, it is what it is, and you can go online and have a look at that. Next slide, please. But in order to develop the framework, there's been a lot of consultation, both locally and nationally again, to make sure we get it right. So it's based on the World Health Organization social determinants of health framework, and within that was kind of the blueprint that was taken around for people to have a look at and to be talked through. And the Institute of Health Equity led this work for us across the system, and in South Yorkshire, we've had specific workshops and spaces where people have commented on this. You'll see some of the, in red there, some of the information's been added in to the information within the slide. And then if we go, oh no, well, I'll show you the final slide in framework in a second. But if you go to the next slide, please, you will see that alongside a large consultation with people about what they thought it should look like for the social determinants of health. We also had a massive work with children and young people, which Shan will talk to you more about. But what I really wanted to highlight was a bit there where young people have said the importance of feeling safe and loved. I thought it was in yellow, but I can't see. Oh, there it is. It's important for young people to feel loved, understood and heard by communities and the spaces that they're a part of. And that very much was translated into the final framework that we've got for now. So if you go to the next slide, please. And if you just click again, you will see that added into the framework is the word safety, which wasn't there before, and that really reflects the comments of children and young people in that part about living conditions. It is about community and at home. So next slide, please. Also, a lot of work has been done, and it's brilliant Barbara's here, because Barbara's really been leading this work around data and collecting the data and understanding what the data is telling us. This, as you can imagine, has been pretty tricky. As we all know, there's a lot of challenges to be able to getting the right data and also to be able to share data, because this data is looking across health and social services to help us to understand where the inequities are and then to consider what it is that we need to do differently. And you'll see Barbara created this slide, but you'll see the different spaces where we struggle to get data at all, where it's a little bit more easier in the yellow, but we have to do more. And then the spaces where we know we've got data that's helpful. If you go to the next slide, please. So what Barbara and team are doing to help support us in the ICB is they're building a BI tool called Cherish, which they named themselves, to be able to put the data into and to help us then have a kind of rolling space where the data is kept updated. And then when we move into the intervention part, we will understand the gaps in data specifically for that, which will help us think about how we connect the dots to get more. So that's a work in progress, and also very important that we keep going with this, not just for the health equity, but also for the bold ambition and for a joint forward plan, to be really clear where we're making a difference and where we need to do more. Next slide, please. And over to you, Shan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about the young people's participation and their voice and influence throughout this project. So as Nick said, it's been going for around a year and a half. And some of the important things that young people wanted me to express today was that if we can just hold off playing.
Yes, okay, that's fine.
One of the things that the young people wanted me to express today was the importance of building relationships with young people to involve them in decisions that affect them, and that meaningful sort of engagement and just not sort of tokenistic and tick box. So working on this project over a year and a half has really allowed young people to have a voice and influence and say, and really work in a way that they are working on the same level with professionals to make those decisions. And as you can see, the framework has been adapted heavily based on what they've said, but not just the health champions themselves, lots of other young people across South Yorkshire, and the other two ICS areas that Nick mentioned, such as Birmingham and Solihull, and Cheshire and Merseyside. So the young people were able to be trained as health champions. A lot of those sessions took place online. As Bernardo's, it's national, so to get lots of young people from the 3 different areas together was a difficult part of the process. So we chose to do that online, where they did lots of training to become a health champion. But they was young people with lived experience and had experience of participation work before as well. So that's just important to express in terms of them understanding a project like this. They had done a bit of participation work before. So they are in a position where they can champion other young people's voices, and hopefully, hold services to account where they may need to be. And yeah, like I said, been involved in a lot of those decision-making processes. It's also been really nice to see their personal development and professional development of the young people involved. So they've had a lot of opportunities to do lots of face-to-face things as well. So their first face-to-face session was in Sheffield, working with the Children and Young People's Alliance, and we're going to show you a short video from this after. The second opportunity they had was to work with the King's Fund project in London, where some of the health champions sat on a joint panel with professionals and were able to speak about the framework, why it's important to them, and everything that they've been involved to sort of shape where it is today. So my whole sort of job role is to make sure that I involve young people in voice and influence work, that have got those lived experiences, work with young people that take part of sort of a core group of young people that come together to help make lasting changes and services and adaptations to certain works. But also to make sure that lots of other young people who don't get the opportunity to be involved in those participation groups for many numerous sort of reasons that the health framework could sort of reflect, that they have a voice as well. So, making sure that we are consulting with hidden groups, young people that may be harder to reach or not able to take part in youth work opportunities and participation work. So we really go out there and make sure that we get those young people's voices, and then the young people that we work with in those participation groups help sort of collate that feedback, look through it, and shape and influence. So if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to take any questions, but yeah, we wanted to show you the film.
Yeah, let's move to the film then. Yes, thanks, Shan.
Co-production in addressing health inequalities is at the heart of the framework, so it kind of gives the power back to the young people to help kind of support the development of it and the approaches kind of going forward.
It's the different factors that interplay when it comes to health and well-being.
All young people are getting the right care that they need based on their individual needs, not based on what adults expect.
It's about collaboratively working together. We can achieve services that are right together, just to engage with young people. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised with the skill set, the intelligence, the knowledge that we can bring.
So by getting young people involved at the start of the participation and using voice and influence work in relation to their own care, it helps make the service right for them.
The health equity framework really gives a chance for young people's voices to be empowered, validated and heard.
I do suffer with cerebral palsy and I really understand how important it is just to have a disability but still be heard.
I feel like it'll mean a lot to young people because then their voices are getting involved in care that they're experiencing.
I feel like a lot of people need to now just come forward and just say their views, and I think it's just important to not be scared or frightened about what you think really.
For me, it's about the challenges and barriers that perhaps at some points of my life stop me living, and making sure that that's not a challenge or barrier for any other young person.
And I'd like to see the changes in how people are judged based on background. Kind of, you don't know what the child or young person has gone through and their individual barriers until you actually ask them.
At the end of the day, if a young person isn't feeling well or know something isn't right, they should be the ones to go forward and say, look, I need this support, and they shouldn't feel scared to do that.
It's often thought about that actually young people want to take over the world. We don't, we just want an equal platform to be a part of those really big policy making, decision making processes.
Thanks, Mags. Some really key points that young people make there within the video, and that was actually filmed in Sheffield in St Mary's Conference Centre where we held the event. I've just got another couple of slides just to talk you into the intervention, so it's kind of like the so what of the framework and the insights. I want to take a moment. If you go to the next slide, please. And again, thanks. Great. So we also held a work, so aside from the workshop that Shan was talking about, we held another workshop with the voluntary and community sector, heavily supported by the Voluntary Community Sector Alliance, who have been absolutely instrumental in helping us with this work. And to be honest, I think one of the highlights or the ability for us to be able to be part of this and to get the opportunity was that we have that within our system. And when we met, we asked them to be able to share with us their insights around working with children, young people and families, and where we thought we should be really focusing on. And again, they really talked about people needing to feel safe, respected and connected in particular. If you go to the next slide, please. Which really very much aligns with the insights from children and young people and what they found was important too. And those two main themes have really come into us how we've developed the intervention. Next slide, please. And also this, so young people particularly spoke about education and education, how it's delivered, and really looking for some different types of ability within education to think about life skills and their aspirations, and we brought that into the intervention as well. Next slide, please. And so the intervention is just a couple of things from this to be really cognizant of. Is it's not a pilot. We're not piloting anything. We're just testing out the approach around the Child Health Equity Framework. So the approach is using the framework, using insights, using data to then build an intervention kind of from bottom up to see how that works for children and young people in the space. We're also working in partnership with people. There is 10k to deliver this intervention over a year, so tiny times. So there's a lot of work working with partners to say, will you come on board and partner with us? We're not going to be able to give you much money remuneration, but it will make a difference, and it is something nationally that will be highlighted when we finish. So we've managed to get to that space, which is good, and I'll tell you in a minute about that. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into all this, it's just to highlight that the test of intervention is around supporting mental health and well-being for young children, so children aged 9 and 10, looking at safe space, safe place. Youth workers will help deliver this for us, and it will be all co-created with young people. So it will be understanding, and it's mostly young people who are struggling to attend school. So that sort of inconsistency in school attendance, understanding what part of that is coming from their mental health and well-being, looking at how we can support that, but also creating a programme of activities around life skills and what it is that they would like to see in that space. Youth champions have been consulted on this, Directors of Public Health have also been consulted, and many other different spaces and places to get to this point. We're still refining it, I would say, to get to where we want to look at what our outputs will be from it, and working with Barbara and the Institute of Health Equity on that one. But we're going to partner with the Rotherham Football Club charity, and they're going to help deliver this for us in Rotherham with a small cohort of young people. So that's just the highlights or the headlines from that. Thank you. Next slide. Great, so coming to the end of the presentation, just to say just how important it is to keep working in partnership in this space and to share what we're doing and think about how it really does underpin the ICP strategy and the joint forward plan priorities. We need to keep working on the data, and anything that people can do to help with that would be amazing. To consider how we take this work into future service delivery and designing service, to think about the alignment with the framework and insights and data, and also to really get that point that Sham was bringing out around the importance of working with young people to make sure that we get it right for them, particularly those who have less agency across our system, and how do we make sure we do that really well. And again, keen to come back and talk about that a bit more once we've had our conference. Just checking, Ruth, is there anything you want to say? Or
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to Nicola and Chan. I mean, it's quite easy to listen to some of this and think, oh, this is obvious things that everybody should be doing. I think the fact that we have got the project across the 3 different areas in Birmingham and Cheshire and Merseyside is significant in that we are systems that have specialist children's hospitals within them. And that is one of the things that makes South Yorkshire and the other 2 regions unique within our ICB in terms of what else we can do from a health perspective. And from a broader perspective, I think the system that we've set up with all of our alliances, which we've obviously had in place for the last year or 2 now, we're starting to see the fruits of. So that relationship with the VCSE Alliance, we've been doing some really good work across with. So it's how that's maturing, I think, now, so that those kind of structures can help work like this really take off, and be thinking about how we're developing what the Children, Young People's Voice and Health Equity Framework is. So loads of work. Does feel like early days. But I think, I say, it's easy to think, well, we should be doing this, but actually South Yorkshire is definitely in a different space to many others across the country. And we need to not forget that, make sure that we're really celebrating it and using it to sort of make sure we've got a much louder voice for our children, young people in South Yorkshire as well. But thank you.
Ruth, thank you. Chantal, thank you. And Nicola, any questions? Hi. Hi,
good morning. Thank you so much for coming back to this. It's really quite inspiring. I mean, there's lots going on, isn't there? It's just bringing it all together so that we're more effective as a system. I was just wondering whether the thing that is not a pilot, we look in particular at how different groups that are more affected by inequalities, health inequalities, are working within that kind of space. In particular, I'm wondering about children that have caring responsibility, because that affects their school attendance, etc. But also how different ethnicity. We have such a rich plethora of communities in South Yorkshire, how it affects the different communities and how we reach out to them rather than expecting them to reach into the non-pilot. Sorry, I've forgotten intervention. Because I know that in Sheffield we do a lot of work in a sense, and I'm sure that it happens in the other 3 places. So it's just because data seems to be a theme on everything I'm going to at the moment, and we need to collect the data because sometimes we don't have the right data to actually, reach any conclusions. So yeah.
All good points, thanks. And so the next step is to work with, message Ben, Director of Public Health in Rotherham, to help us get some data that's going to drill down to that, so we make sure that we invite the right young people into this space and intervention. But also a good point about, what I didn't mention in the intervention is part of asset mapping what's already in that space and making sure that we either connect in with it or we don't do something the same. But we had to find the place first, which we've managed to do. So that's the next step. So thanks. Yeah.
Richard and then David. Richard.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting. Just a couple of things. The 3 different places in the UK that are doing this, are you all doing the same interventions? First thing. Second thing, for the bit you described for us, the 9 to 10-year-olds, I was just trying to get a sense of scale. So how many children are benefiting from it now? How many children do you think could benefit from it in South Yorkshire? How are we doing that across the 4 different territories we serve?
So the first point about interventions is no, which is interesting. So Birmingham and Solihull, they're testing intervention about social value in contracts. And Cheshire Merseyside are doing some intervention around oral health. And our intervention is probably the most direct with young people. We will be doing it really small scale, Richard, to see how it works. So we're talking 10 to 12 young people for the first 6 months, and again in the second 6 months. I mean, our hope is that with that, so we want to make it sustainable. And we want to see if it makes a difference in that space. So what we will be doing is connecting in with the schools that the young people attend, because one of the measures will be to see whether young people manage school better and attend better, those types of things. So whether supporting mental health and wellbeing way further down the line, different from in your mental health support teams, will make a difference, is what we're really trying to test.
And so if it works, presumably the intention is that it gets scaled up. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how many 9 to 10-year-olds across South Yorkshire do you think could benefit from it? I don't know how many 9 to 10-year-olds there are in South Yorkshire, let alone the ones who would fit the scheme.
I mean, I couldn't tell you that either, but what I could tell you is that school absence is one of the highest it's ever been, and the rationale for choosing 9 and 10 is thinking about the pandemic and COVID and where their learning was at that point, and then hitting school and how that impacted on young people, particularly young people who are more vulnerable. So coming back to your point, Angela, about thinking about young carers looked after children in that space as well. So I suppose we're going to work, hopefully, all that out as we go and come back and share it as we go along, Richard, but not that clear at the moment.
Lots of young people spoke about how important the mental health support teams in schools were, but that actually lots of young people were missed from being able to get support from those, especially the ones that might be more well behaved or quieter in schools. And lots of young people in those positions are coming out of school due to the mental health and not being able to get the support that they needed. So that was really important to some of the young people to help shape that.
David.
Thanks, Nicola. So first thing I wanted to say was that Nicola and I, thankfully, were invited to speak at the Health Service Journal Health Inequalities event in Birmingham. And I think you go to these events and sometimes it does make you think about how much good stuff is going on. So I think our opportunity to share some of the work in South Yorkshire, I think, is the first point. I think the second thing also is it's difficult to encompass all the work that's going on. So from a health inequalities perspective, we've got our core 20+5 framework that is very health specific. There are some elements of kind of preventive stuff. And finally, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's event because I know you've got your conference not too far from here. So I'm looking forward to hearing young people's voices within that. So thank you. More comments and questions. Thank you.
Damien online. Hello, Damien.
Thank you, Nicola. Really appreciated the presentation, and also fessing up that I'll be there tomorrow as well. My comment really was linked to the last but one around the scaling up, and obviously the efficacy of the intervention needs to be determined in terms of presumably increased commitment to school attendance or reduced presentation. I'm just trying to get a sense of what's unique about this, and it feels to me that decontextualizing it from school is one of the requirements around the safe space, and particularly that feedback from the young person around others getting missed at school. Just trying to get a sense of what's different, and also the bit about the scaling up, which is, you know, how we can plug this back into other wider young people's services. I'm thinking youth-related activities in places themselves.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it'd be great if it came to that, but yeah, you're right. It is around the different approach to doing this. So safe people, safe space is particularly key to this. So not having anything delivered within school, and also that ability for young people to share what it is that they're most worried about or affects them, but also to develop the programme. So lots of people have said, well, what is your intervention? Well, the intervention is the ability to support that safe space, and then for young people to co-create the activities and what it is they would like to do in that space. In all of those activities, hopefully they will build their confidence, self-esteem, and be able to manage things better. But the ultimate aim, which we will never know because you'd have to track it for a long time, is that they will gain lots of different ways of being able to manage stressful situations in a different way going forward into later life, which will help their health.
So if I may, just two further points then. One was around understanding what the impact is for the individual, which you've started to explain, and there are a number of tools out there. Presumably, I'm thinking around triangle consulting and looking at some of those methods to be able to get some sort of, I was going to say, comparability between the three big sites, but also tools that are utilised in other settings. And then the other point really was, if we're looking at absenteeism as a proxy for reduced absenteeism as a proxy for impact, is more around the significance of the role of parents within that wider relationship, because parents can be over parenting and overly cosseting in some regards, or there are a number of other factors. Just interested to know what sort of engagement through the process parents have, and whether or not you've baselined any of their views and also then looked at them after any intervention, or proposed to, should I say.
Yeah, so we've had conversations about parents and carers and their involvement, but we've not got to the point of what that might look like. But it is really important, you're right. I can't remember what else you said, but the measures, that's it.
Yeah,
so,
I was looking at like the impact stars that Triangle Consulting use, which are you know, a massive database, and therefore in terms of looking at benchmarked or comparable sort of segments, I just wondered whether or not that was part of the assessment.
Yeah, I mean, we've not particularly talked about that specific measure, but we are looking at different measures where we'll be able to benchmark how things go from beginning to end, particularly for the young people themselves. Looking at some of the measures that youth organisations already use, so trying to work in what's already there. Luckily, we're being supported by the Institute of Health Equity when it comes to the evaluation, the outcomes and the measures, because it's certainly not my expert area, but and Barbara from the ICB too. So we'll just develop it as we go.
Okay, thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Dane. Alexis.
Oh, sorry. I think it's just so go back and saying, I think Damien said, first of all, a couple of things I was going to say about impact. For me, as with the last time, I think this is a really great project because what it does is gets underneath actually some of the real inequalities that could then lead to poor outcomes for young people who become young adults. And so I think there's such significant learning from this that we could take forward. So I'm a huge supporter of what you're doing. The other bit I was going to suggest is making a link into the safeguarding boards. And the reason why I say that is because actually recently in Sheffield we had our Section 11, we have a collaborative meeting in which we look at our learning from each of the evaluations from our self-evaluations of safeguarding. And one of the key issues that came up was about health equity, particularly for young people. And so I think it was quite a good learning. And I think there's something about how do you make these connections between not only the learning from this project into that prevention of harm, which I think is a key kind of focus. And I could certainly make links within Sheffield and across the way. And I think these links would be a good way of kind of joining up systems and joining up thinking for the future of young people. So I just want to say thank you again.
Alexis, thank you. Any other points? Can I thank you for coming along? Really, really interesting presentation, very helpful. A number of us are joining you tomorrow, I hope, which would be great to see you. And part of that is actually to hear the young people's voices directly, which I think is part of what we'll get out of tomorrow. So thank you very much again, and lovely to see you again. Thank you. Following up from that, Gavin, are you going to explain where we are next and give us a verbal update on this?
I will do. Thanks, Chair. So, morning, everybody. I'm Gavin Boyle. I'm the Chief Executive of NHS South Yorkshire, the Integrated Care Board. I mean, clearly the Children's Conference tomorrow is going to be the place to be. So I think it looks like most of us are going to be there. So I'm planning to attend as well. So it looks like it's going to be quite an event. So really helpful to follow on from the presentation we've just had, because I'd like to preface what I'm about to say by just acknowledging the huge amounts of work that's happening across South Yorkshire, particularly in relation to children and young people. And it is, quite rightly, one of the four principal priorities of the strategy that we've developed collectively and that we're committed to implementing. So, I mean, really, this update relates to a conversation, really, that took place between the local authority chief executives and myself earlier in the year, which was quite a wide-ranging discussion about all manner of issues. But one of the things that struck us, I think, was the degree to which the challenges in terms of how do we serve our children and young people across South Yorkshire was probably the most major challenge that we were facing, whether that is in health or care. And one of the things we agreed to do was to convene a roundtable conversation to explore whether one, we really understand the scope and scale of the challenge, but most importantly, could there be more that we could do in a collective sense? Because no one organisation has got the answer to how do we serve children and young people as well as we possibly can. It inevitably is a cross sector challenge. So we met about a month ago. So it was local authority leaders, myself, directors of children's services, public health colleagues, ICB leads, but also providers in the form of particularly the Children and Young People's Alliance, but also contributions from mental health leaders as well. And to be frank, the focus was principally around some of the mental health challenges that face young people in South Yorkshire. One of the things we did was to reflect on some of the evidence that's presented through our joint JSNA across South Yorkshire. So if you look at 6 to 23-year-olds, something like 17% of that part of our population suffer from a mental disorder. About 1 in 12 will experience self-harm. So it's a huge problem, and we've touched on in the earlier presentation how that kind of presents itself in terms of the different parts of our system. For example, a massive impact in terms of education. I mean, we've touched on already in terms of school absence being a major challenge, but also a strain on care services, health services. I suppose the capacity and quality of some aspects of provision that are available to us, and the cost of the system of that as well. As part of the conversation, we particularly began to focus on quite a specific area, particularly in relation to neurodiversity, and a sense that if we were going to pick a priority as a collective, that would be a good place to start. So that was in fact what we agreed to do. And when reflecting on that, there were a number of key points in the conversation. So one of the critical observations was the increase in demand for services relating to neurodiversity, particularly since the pandemic. And words such as exponential were used, but I think that the numbers of referrals for neurodiversity assessments, for example, had quadrupled since the pandemic. So this is it's a huge challenge, and I think there's a growing realization that the current model is just not capable of meeting that level of demand. So we need to do something different. And so when we were discussing the current model, there was a sense that it was over medicalized in terms of the way that it's organized. It's not keeping up with demand, as I've just mentioned, but also it's not serving young people and their families well. So I think that was a critical observation. There was something about flipping the model. So we've got a reactive model that responds to crisis at the moment. I think that there was a strong consensus that we need to shift into prevention and much earlier intervention. There was a reflection on just the practical issues of access and long waits. We've got extremely long waits in South Yorkshire, in common with probably the rest of the country, really, in terms of neurodiversity assessments. And that's a reflection on, I suppose, the interaction between that growth in demand and the current model. And then I think the final point was just this issue of capacity of the current system and indeed cost, as I've mentioned. The current model is not only is it not serving our communities well, it's actually unaffordable and unsustainable. So we need to think of a different way of approaching that. So what the outcome of the conversation was really to commission a piece of work to basically design a proposal for a collective program of work to address some of the challenges that I've just mentioned. So that commission needs to I think it needs to take stock of the work that's currently happening, but also to define a kind of scope and scale of that program of work. So that was the principal commission. A number of key leaders took on responsibility to develop that proposal. So I'm particularly grateful to Meredith Dixon Teasdale, who's the Director of Children's Services in Sheffield, who took the lead responsibility to gather other partners. So, Ruth and Children and Young People's Alliance, some members of my team, as well as other colleagues, to develop that proposal. And we'll reconvene as a group at the beginning of July to receive those recommendations around scope, but also a kind of sense of what type of interventions might we want to consider at an early stage. And I guess the governance and architecture we'll need to have in place to drive that programme of work forward. So it's really just an update on the conversation that took place. I think what would be really helpful is once we've developed that proposal and there's a clear sense of direction about what's the work to be done and how we're going to do it, it'd be great to bring that back here to the Integrated Care Partnership. So that's the update, Chair.
Gavin, thank you. Any questions on that? Angela?
Just a quick one, Gavin. I was wondering whether also we were looking at young people, but also the effect of whatever the young people are going through has on the whole family and vice versa, because that is something that sometimes is missed, is the fact that a young person is not isolated, is part of a family often, or a group, and how it affects. So is someone's mental health problems can also create anxiety and mental health problems for other people, let's call it family, and vice versa. So if an adult has got mental health problems, sometimes it has effects on young people. So is there something that we're also looking at? So not just looking at the young people in isolation, but how their struggles affect the health and well-being of other people around them and vice versa.
I think that's a really important point, and so I don't want to preempt the work that's now in train to develop the proposal, but I'll certainly feed that back. But I'd be amazed if that wasn't part of the design, because I mean it's probably a reflection on, it's an extension of this idea of over medicalisation. It's as if there's an intervention that can be made with the child that will fix everything, which is clearly not the case. It's far more complex than that, and you can't think about the well-being of a child or a young person without considering that context, and certainly family, but also those wider issues around education and some of the other factors actually that were picked up in the earlier presentation. So I think that's a really good point, and I think it speaks to, we need a more sophisticated approach to this rather than simply, there's an intervention we can make with an individual child.
Any other questions? It is interesting when I talk to local authority leaders and when we saw them about the money 4 or 5 months ago, they were more the concern about the cost of children's services has overtaken the cost of elderly services, which is what they used to be concerned about 4 or 5 years ago. And that was all 4 local authorities across South Yorkshire. And I just think that's really interesting that that's now become the problem that they would be most concerned about, even from a financial perspective, let alone the service implications, the implications of children and their families. And that says we haven't got it right. So this work, I think, is really important. Thank you, Gavin. Anything else on that? Damien.
If I can have the right of reply on that local authority leaders point, we've got a bit of a Solomon's choice. We'd rather not be in either position of seeing one relatively better or worse than the other. In a world of scarcity, it means that actually what we are doing is having to try and cope and doing that badly. But we've certainly been driven by a number of factors. 1, underfunding. 2, increase in demand exacerbated by the sort of mechanics and the financing of it, but also, let's be honest about it, not actually having some of those sort of integrated approaches to how we deal with some of the more complex challenges. So I think it's a complex of all of those, and certainly Gavin's assessment, I think, starts, I think the phrase was more sophisticated. I tend to eschew the keep it simple, except when we're talking about relationship based practice, which I think we do need to shift towards. But it does feel to me that anything that brings about much better integrated practice and process is going to not just make it more effective and efficient, but is going to allow us to target those increasingly limited resources to get better impacts. Cheers.
Thank you, Damien. Okay, thank you for that. Can we move on to the next agenda item, which is data and insight strategy? Barbara and Kieran. Barbara, are you going to lead us through this? Hello, Kieran. Nice to see you. You want to lead us through, Barbara, and do the introductions, please?
Yes. Hi, I'm Barbara Coyle. I'm the Assistant Director of Data Insights and Public Health Analysis.
Hi, Kieran Baker, Chief Digital Information Officer for NHS South Yorkshire. Yeah, so today I guess we're just going to give you a quick whiz through our integrated care system data and insight strategy that's been a bit of a culmination of work taking place over a number of months. I think quite a number of you in the room have heard various conversations on this topic for the last few months. It's worthwhile noting that a colleague isn't presenting with us today, Amy Coggan. She's led the curation of this work over the last number of months, but she's on a honeymoon, so I guess we can give her a bit of a break there. Just going back to that word integrated, I think some of you have heard me say this before. Integrated is very much the buzzword, but there's nothing integrated about the data that we curate and how we use those to create insights to really help us understand and improve health and care. And it's really important that we cultivate that capability in South Yorkshire. I think, Gavin, you alluded to the point about the fact that no single organisation has the answer. And I think that's the same within data and insights. It's really important that we create that holistic environment, that holistic approach to data and insights to really underpin South Yorkshire as an insight-led system. So Barbara and I are just going to walk you through the strategy step by step. It is already available online because it has been out for engagement with a variety of different stakeholders, and there will be a publicly accessible version released shortly. Next slide, please. You've all obviously seen this before. This is our integrated care partnership strategy, and I just want to call out, I guess, a couple of points. That point around being an insight-driven system, and that data is, recognised as a key enabler for transformation across South Yorkshire. But we need to be incredibly user-focused in how we do that. and we need to foster and utilise our fantastic partnerships across South Yorkshire to really ensure we're getting the best value and the best benefit out of the data that we hold. And next slide, please. And just call out another quick point. That's from the ICP partnership strategy. It filters down to our joint forward plan as well. We've called out that specific need to embed intelligence and population health management approaches across our system. And that's also referenced in other national publications like the What Good Looks Like framework. And I think at the start of 2023, there was some guidance published by NHS England about creating a business intelligence function for each of our systems. I think what we've hopefully done with this strategy is gone a long way to addressing that, and also really creating that bridge between where we are now and the insights that we need to really underpin our insight-led system. Next slide, please.
So I've spoken to you all before about this diagram, which basically just sets out the challenges we have and all the factors that create our health. So if we understand that only between 10 to 20% of our health is created by access to healthcare, it means everything else is in scope for what we need to start addressing as part of the data and insight strategy. So to improve health, we also then need our data that can across these boundaries too, and these silos. So we need to look across the whole system and do more to be able to link our data with the wider determinants, with those outcomes, as just mentioned actually in the children's discussion as well. So therefore we need an intelligent solution that equally looks and works at and across the whole system, and particularly between those gaps in the interplays of what can cause and create different outcomes that we're getting in health. And equally, we need our data to work at the individual level, but also importantly at our whole population level. And as Kieran mentioned, that's where the integration is so key for data. Next slide, please. So our task is to sort of build and embed population health and intelligence across our whole system, and we do mean the integrated care system. And that includes to be able to create a data platform that will allow us to do all the work that we need to do. But it has to be user-centered and it has to match with, you know, some of the guidance that we've got about what good looks like. And there's no point, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. But we also want to be ambitious, and it needs to be a long-term capability. We're not talking about a quick fix here. This is not a quick solution that we're going to buy off the shelf that other that you might hear other things happening. It's something that we can build, that we can own as South Yorkshire. So it is a long-term solution that we're looking towards. And we need to do that. We need to invest in our people, and we need the skills and capabilities across the whole South Yorkshire to do that. Next.
Thanks, Barbara. So just a bit of a background in terms of what we've actually been doing. So again, going back to that point about being user-centered, it would have been remiss of us to go and sit in a darkened room and think that we as analytical professionals know what the answer is in terms of what good looks like from an insight provision perspective. So what we did was undertake quite a number of discovery sessions with various different cross sections of different stakeholders, different organisations across the system, to really understand what good looks like in terms of intelligence provision. We centred it on a number of basic questions, and then we built up that information, that knowledge based on what the users felt, but also, as Barbara mentioned, building in other local strategies, so place-based priorities, organisational strategies, and national guidance into the entire approach. And we took that as a bit of a cycle. So we listened, we went away, we drafted, we wrote, we went back, and we continuously add this iterative improvement to this approach. Next slide, please. Won't dwell on this too much. So this is just some of the user stories that came out of those conversations. And I guess the fundamental theme is that it's everything from getting the basics right, getting the right data in the right place, linked, right through to really visionary pieces in terms of using artificial intelligence much more readily to really maximise the value of the insights that we have within our data sets. Next slide, please. So this is just a bit of a summary of the strategy on a page, if you like. I've tried to mirror the ICP strategy layout, if you like, the high-level purpose, underpinned by 5 key initiatives, and then a set of delivery pillars beneath that, which, as we talk about people, capacity, building that workforce, will hopefully underpin the delivery of those initiatives. And on the subsequent slides, we'll just walk you through each of those initiatives in a little more detail. Next slide, please. So on this first one then, so we mentioned about there's nothing integrated about the data that we hold. So the first key initiative that we've got down is to get all the data in the right place. As a matter of consequence of the 4 CCGs becoming the single ICB, we had to look at our own architecture anyway. We had 3 data platforms. We only really needed 1. And then at that point, we thought, well, actually, we could open out access to this, obviously subject to information governance controls and so on, to actually have a single version of the truth that not only the ICB can use, but the integrated care system can use. So what the aim here is to bring a variety of different data sets together to create that real cradle to grave understanding of our public health and care needs, their outcomes. So really understanding that compelling story of what our public need, covering the dimensions of workforce, activity, performance, finance, health, social care, primary care data, acute, weather patterns, even bringing all that into one single platform gives us so much strength to be able to harvest really rich insights that'll help make good decisions around how we deliver health and care in the future. And I guess there's no better example than COVID than that. We were very lucky, actually, as a country, that we had quite a lot of big data sets in a single environment at that point in time, which allowed us to analyze and interrogate those data sets in a linked way together to identify those most vulnerable from the infection from COVID. But it's not all about getting the data in the right place. As I said, federating access to our analysts and other colleagues across the system, data consumers across our system, will really help us ensure we're getting the best out of that data platform. And as I mentioned, information governance is incredibly important. We need to ensure we handle all data safely, sensitively, and securely. And I guess last point on this is, as I mentioned, due to the consequence of the formation of the ICB and the harmonisation of our architecture, we already had that platform in place anyway, and therefore we're quite well down the road in terms of building this platform and looking at the data sets that we need to bring into that. And hopefully soon we'll be testing access with colleagues outside of the ICB to ensure that that platform can work and serve the needs of a broader group of people. Next slide, please. Up to you.
So in terms of supporting the workforce, one of our initiatives is to build a data and insights alliance across South Yorkshire. A couple of years ago now, we did a survey and we identified over 200 analysts working in South Yorkshire in health and care, from councils, from trusts, from the Mayor's office, from fire. So there are a lot of people, and I would say for me, it feels like I had a lot of data analysts. When we talk about, we feel like we need more analysts and we need more data. But they are there and we are here. And so it's all about how do we actually mobilise and make use of what we already have. So that was the starting point really around the building the alliance. And we can do that in 2 ways. One is about supporting at each place and building what we're going to call sort of offices of data analytics, where we will bring together the business intelligence lead from trusts, from councils, from anyone who's working in that area. So in Rotherham, for example, that can come together and work through the issues that we've got, or work through the solutions, the data solutions to the issues that we've got. So Rotherham already have one. It's actually called RODA. So we're just going to use that model and roll that out across all of our 4 places. And we'll use that as space to really understand the problems that we've got and how data can help. So one of the things that we were talking about, just picking up with what Nick was saying earlier, we want to do work on trying to bring in data about school absenteeism and linking that to health outcomes. Now we can use the RODA to help get the data sharing agreements in place so we can actually start doing that data linkage. And then we can put it into the platform that Kieran's described, and then that gives us new insights. So we'll be able to share the data that we've got much better at place. And the other angle then to supporting our workforce is actually about skills and sharing the knowledge that we've got, because we can't expect every organisation to have an expert in health economics and statistics and building, but we know that they exist across the patch. So it's how we make use of those skills that we've got and share them and help teach and peer support and learn from each other. So we're developing these communities of practice. And the first one that's about to be launched is on advanced analytics. And again, it's across South Yorkshire, and it's led by a colleague from a trust, and he's going to be talking us through, you know, how we can keep up to date, use new technologies, how we can get our skills in AI and R and machine learning and bring those to bear on real world problems that we have in South Yorkshire. So we're also establishing various hackathons where we're going to bring people together who've got the skills, got the data, and then say, right, let's try and have a go at fixing this problem that we might have, be it around the admissions rates, or maybe it is around school absenteeism and the health impact of that. So we've got a number of different alliances and community of practice that we want to set around data engineering, and what's really actually important, data quality and maturity. You know, if we want to do more analysis of inequalities, we need to be actually better at capturing it. So what can we be doing within our own data sets about making sure we are capturing ethnicity, we are capturing deprivation, we are capturing if a child is a carer or not, and how we can use different techniques to actually, you know, generate those insights. And then we've also one around visualization, data journalism, because it's really important that the ability for decision makers to be able to access the data and the insights that they need in a way that they are comfortable and confident in interpreting. So there's, you know, there's definitely a role for the advanced analyst, but what about someone who can just help translate and help people explain what it all means and do the interpretation alongside the actual production of the numbers. So that's the essence of the alliance. Next slide, please. So our next initiative, you know, leads off from that really, and it's about how we use innovative tools and techniques. We need to be able to be a flexible and responsive service. So one of the case studies that we were talking about was, you know, we set up a system coordination centre that is a live document that pulls data in using new technologies like APIs and other fancy language that it doesn't really matter what it means, I don't think. It's doing fancy stuff with digital, and that can bring the data in together into a portal that we can share. So, you know, that's a really good example of how we can work together as a system, build something really quickly that has a lot of value quickly. Next slide, please. And then our next initiative is really important, and that's about working closely with our academic partners, opening up access to the data and the insights that we've got with our research partners. So we're working really closely. So we have a South Yorkshire SDE, Secure Data Environment. There's a Yorkshire and Humber one. So working closely to make sure that our platform aligns and supports what they need to do as well within the research. Recognising that we've all got our own particular needs, so we will be using data and we have permissions to use data for direct care. Obviously research don't, so we need to make sure we've got built in place an interoperability that will support different access requirements. And this is also really important so that we can communicate with our public that we're using the data in a correct way that's got the governance in place that we need to. So yeah, you know, we've got various different initiatives in place at the moment about how we're going to work with our research colleagues. But again, it's about how we mobilise all that capacity and skills that we've got across South Yorkshire. So next. Next slide again. I'll just move. The next initiative is actually using the data, using the skills that we've got, and we've got to bring it all together by using and doing more around population health management. So we actually can create a data model about individuals, but also about our whole populations, their demographics, the wider determinants. It might be about poverty or school absenteeism, the clinical outcomes that they've got, how much of the services they use. So we can generate these population level descriptions of what's actually happening to the different cohorts and the different types of people that live in South Yorkshire. You know, we talk a lot about inequalities, but the way that we can actually, get action on inequalities is to have the right data that can actually tell us about those. And so next, and then lastly, it's about how we build actionable insights. So one of the things we want to do, and I've talked to you about this before, is building an insights bank. And this is about where we can actually gather the data and the voices of communities. So we actually started this with the children's programme. And with thanks to Healthwatch and Fran and colleagues, we've been doing an initial collation of insights. So we've got over 50 different reports about insights that were generated from communities and working with different populations. Most of them all come from the VCSE. And the first report we put up there was from Chili Pep. So the idea behind the bank, we will actually be able to get the different insights about what people actually think and feel. And then I can link that to the hard data I've got about the numbers about people. And then the third element, we need to link that to the evidence about actually what works. So I can talk about in children's, I can give you numbers about, how many children are overweight or obese. I can't tell you why. But if I go to the voice and an insights bank, actually we can do some interrogation of that. And when we looked at the Chili Pet report, a lot of what children were saying is about the use of food in schools. They do not have time to sit and eat a meal. It's something that you rush through. So how are we expecting children to have a good relationship with food in that context? And then we can go to the research evidence that will tell us about the different interventions that may or not have worked. And interestingly, I was trying to get a triangulation there, and there were some insights that the breakfast schools, while they didn't necessarily help with attainment, they did help with turning up for school in time, and that they were really positive there. So it wasn't necessarily about getting them fed, but it was about getting them into school. So there's lots of different sort of insights by bringing those three elements together that we can actually start to understand and hopefully drive more action that we need. And just say the next element around this will be sort of pilot it with children, and then we're moving on to inclusion health groups, because they're an example where we don't have much data. Therefore, we need to do loads more to get those qualitative insights, and then bring that together to help us generate what we need to do, basically. And I think that's it from us.
Well, that was great. Really, really interesting stuff. Fascinating stuff. Right. You start, you're involved, and then I think Angela. No.
Thank you both. Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's long overdue, and I think it'll be brilliant to bring the data together. But I'm really interested in the part that, where you're talking about the community insights and connecting people and voices. One of the takeaways from the work that Chili Pep have done and that Chantal described was that it's how you have the conversations and develop the insights, so participatory approaches, which I think also need to be supported by learning about how you bring understanding from communities where there is just a kind of lack of understanding. So the thing that we did learn from COVID was that if the people in those places have the conversations or a skill to kind of do the research and insight gathering, and I think there are a lot of examples that we've got in Sheffield and the wider South Yorkshire area where communities themselves have been trained to do community research, and there's the work that Sarah Dew's doing, which is really helpful in developing the sort of the how of the research. I think it's something that actually transfers into the inclusion health groups, and I know that there are quite a few organisations that have got expertise, but there maybe are not connected in. So we need to bring in the right people who've got the right agency, but also the expertise at a grassroots level, because I think what made a difference during that COVID response was it's kind of much smaller than LSOA. It was the kind of street level sometimes. So, but yeah, I think this is a really great piece of work. Thank you.
I've got Angela, then I've got Rachel online. Angela, I've seen you, Rachel.
Yes, thank you. This looks amazing. And I know it's a long-term project. I'm just wondering, in terms of not being an expert on data or, very technical, we're all talking about data and data sharing, I think, in all our organizations, because it's a real kind of issue, isn't it? Because we're all doing things in silos. And this is great because it will bring the data together that we can then use more effectively. But I'm wondering about data systems and how they talk to each other. And this is something that comes practically from something that we've experienced at Sheffield City Council. So because all partners will be investing in their data systems because they've got to be updated, you know, the contract is out. Are you already talking to partners and saying these are the the specs that we need to be able to talk to your data or for your data to talk to us? Or are we just, because it's a long-term thing, it's just there will be in the long term, there will be times when partners have to update their their systems, and it makes more sense, much more sense financially but also practically to have specs that will then be useful to come into this.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that, Bob?
Yeah, please. Yes, we are talking to various different partners. So a good example is going back to the presentation of community practice around data engineering. So when we embarked upon the journey to build our first data platform in the cloud using modern cloud techniques, there was no community to lean upon to have those conversations. Hopefully, by having that community there, if a local authority or a trust or whoever needs to upgrade their architecture to best of breed standards, then they've got community practice to work through. But yes, we are having conversations with various different partners about what their data architecture looks like. But also we are building our platform in such a way that it is flexible. So the System Coordination Centre is a good example of that. We recognise there's different maturities across different organisations in terms of data and digital capability. So we therefore present a very flexible opportunity for trusts to send data to us. So actually, I think there's various different methods in which we ingest data from each of those trusts, but we set ourselves up flexibly to reflect, I guess, the variety of the technical landscape.
Thanks, Kieran. Rachel, and then Eleanor, then Richard. Rachel.
Hi, sorry to be a floating head. So of those 200 analysts that you mentioned, there will be some in, well, many in local authorities, I expect, and public health teams might be very different to how they were when public health first came over, but certainly each of the 4 local authority areas will have a JSNA product of some type, and as part of that or alongside that there will be, particularly in Doncaster, lots of insight and voice. We've had a programme for a couple of years of appreciative inquiry that asks about what's strong in communities. We've completed the Fairness and Wellbeing Commission, so we've got all sorts of things that it would be good to be able to match, link or bring into what this is as well.
Yep, we're definitely connected with Doncaster. We've always had initial conversations about what your ODA will look like. DODA, feel free to change the name. So yeah, don't worry, you're part of those conversations.
Eleanor.
Thanks.
Cheers, thank you both. Brilliant. What's not to like? However, no, I've got a question because I found the presentation quite complicated, challenging. So forgive me if it's me that's not understanding it, but I'm going to assume it's quite a challenging area and just go ahead and ask the question. I've been kind of road testing it in my head because it's complicated. When you talked about user-centred, I'm thinking, what does it mean for Sheffield? What does it mean for me, this challenge I've got? So I just want to kind of unpick that a little bit. 2018, the Health and Wellbeing Board in Sheffield sponsored an intelligence-led approach to the end of life. And we've been, forgive me, trying to do a mini version of what you've achieved. It's unsophisticated, it's, we've tried hard, but it looks nothing like that. Isn't this now a point in time when I can go, okay, I give up, but there's some brilliant people regionally that, I'm being honest. No, but I suppose there's a thing about what I'm seeing is that are we trying to reinvent a little inferior wheel when actually we can now say, right, South Yorkshire partners, Sheffield are still wanting to have an intelligence-led approach to an end-of-life strategy. Can you help us with that? Or do you go, no, I've got another piece of work I'm busy on? Or how does it all fit together in that sense? Thank you.
Well, I think that's the importance of the ODA and the Sheffield Office of Data Analytics, that problem can come to their because like you say, the solution is a bit of ICB data, it's a bit of council data, it's a bit potentially of the VCSE data. So everyone's going to have a little bit of their part of a puzzle, and it's how we bring it together. I mean, I don't see this as it's not a service that the ICB is running. It's an alliance of all partners across South Yorkshire, and Sheffield will set up and have its own, its own ODIA. We're not looking to chair that. In other places it's chaired by like a public health consultant in the local authority, but there would be the place that you could pose that question and then ask, what is it that you've got? What bits of data have you got that can answer that question? So I think it would be almost for Sheffield to prioritise it themselves, if you like, rather than it's not a service that we're offering as such. If you need a place to host your data that everyone's pulling together, we can offer that via our platform, and we would offer that as a service.
Yeah. So the answer is no. It's still your responsibility. Richard.
Thank you. I think I heard this is a sort of South Yorkshire sort of footprint piece of work. But sometimes I see NHS England regional analyses of sort of data on the trusts I'm responsible for that's got a bit more insights than I can get from my own internal stuff. So how is it linked to what NHSE region are doing? And you said federated and you said data platform, but you haven't said federated data platform in one phrase. And I think there's this big federated data platform. So are you creating a local version rather than using the national one? And if so, why?
Okay, so first question, we are linking in with regional teams, so Nicola Troop and the team. So we're continuously in conversation, because yes, we see data coming out from regional teams, and sometimes we produce data sets that don't necessarily match what comes out regionally and even nationally in national statistics. So we'll regularly be working with those teams to understand what their offering is, what ours is, and trying to make sure that we're not duplicating where it's appropriate. In terms of the federated data platform, yes, there is the National Federated Data Platform. Currently, that is restricted to specific use cases that are very acute focused. And that's as a result of the data sets that are readily available for the federated data platform. There may very well be a point in time in the future where the features and the data sets available within that platform are similar to or overtake what we have got in South Yorkshire. At that point, we may make a judgment call in terms of do we migrate or otherwise. But at this moment in time, we feel that we can create a bit of a gravity around South Yorkshire first with a broader array of data sets. And because we're building that in the cloud, it means it's revenue based. So it means that we can turn it off. We can turn the tap off and migrate to the federated data platform at a point in time in the future if it is appropriate to do so.
Can I just follow it? So is there a risk that for the bits of our practice that are under the federated data platform umbrella that will be sort of serving two masters in terms of the data externally? Will we have to feed the FDP and the South Yorkshire system?
No, because what the data sets we get from acutes come through the national data flows anyway, so it should be the same data flows. It's only where there are other bespoke data sets like the System Coordination Centre or another discharge hub tool that we might spin up just for South Yorkshire that might be separate. But yeah, generally we're all trying to use the same nationally collected data flows.
Thank you. I think that was really fascinating, and I've got to tell you, I didn't start off thinking that was going to be fascinating. So that was really helpful. Thank you very much. And I actually think you got a real sense here that this is, everyone realizes how important this is and the value that we can get out of this. And even the conversation earlier on the children's services, really important stuff. So really helpful. Thank you very much. I think very widespread support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Alexis, I apologize. I didn't see you.
Hi, just a couple of questions here. I think this was a really great tool, and I think great opportunity actually for a number of for rollout across South Yorkshire. A couple of questions for me is, how does this link into the shared care record, which is going to go live soon? So will that be an opportunity to go and obviously have a data platform to go and support us across local authorities and South Yorkshire? And the second question is that I couldn't quite see it, but there's also like a lot of national data for around national outcomes and impact through like ASCOF outcomes, through I think you get through NHS Digital, and also like locality statements that show the impact on people. And we heard quite a lot about impact on children and young people earlier on. There's also quite a lot of data about impact on adults and what we're taking forward. So for me, there's something powerful about this tool to say, not only what the intelligence is telling us and the way we need to target our energies, but also what's the impact that we're starting to have across South Yorkshire. Because I do think that's quite a fundamental question. Because if I was like thinking about it from the point of view of the public, I'd want to see not only is the data that I've got, but also how is this making a difference for me in my life in different parts of of South Yorkshire. So if that could be built into it and that could be developed further, I think that would be a really powerful way forward.
Yeah, thanks. So just on your first one about shared care records, yes, so we are looking at use cases of rolling out the shared care record into local authorities to support with social care and so on. So that's definitely in the FN office. That's very much a direct care use case, whereas collecting these data will be pseudonymised for commissioning population health, operational support, and so on, unless otherwise agreed. Then in terms of the broader data sets that are available nationally, yes, absolutely. So we've already started having a conversation about client level data set. We know that's collected nationally. We don't see that currently. But I believe we're on the data sharing agreements for it. So we're trying to understand how we can get that into our NHS South Yorkshire platform, because those data are collected with NHS number, which means it can be pseudonymised with the same key, which means they're thereby linkable to other data sets, which then starts to build that cradle to grave record. So we will be opening our doors to other data sets that are really going to add intrinsic value.
I'll kick off, Chair, if that's okay. So, morning everybody, I'm Christine Joy, I'm the Chief People Officer at the ICB, and I'm here with Tina. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I think some of you have met me before, but Tina Slater, Head of Employment and Careers at the Combined Authority.
Thank you. Next slide, please. We just wanted to update on Work Well. We did do a presentation on this just before we submitted a bid, so this is just an update on that. But just to remind colleagues, in the spring budget in 23, the government announced over £2 billion to support disabled people and people with a health condition to start, stay and succeed in work, of which Work Well was one of the component parts. There are other measures which will drive forward new approaches to work and health, and that includes introducing employment advisors into musculoskeletal clinical pathways, scaling up MSK community hubs, and introducing universal support, which is a new supported employment service. So Work Well sits within that context. Next slide, please. Work Well Vanguard programmes were designed to support around 60,000 disabled people and people with mental and physical health conditions. South Yorkshire Integrated Care Board, in partnership with the Mayoral Combined Authority, has been successful in its bid to become one of the pilot areas, which is fantastic news for us. That means that around £3.5 million worth of funding will come into South Yorkshire and be used to provide low intensity work and health assessments that support individuals with their occupational health needs to overcome barriers to work. And that could include mental health conditions and those with MSK conditions, which are two of the most common barriers to starting or staying in employment. I mean, as you all know, and around this table, we do know that South Yorkshire has amongst the highest rates of economic inactivity linked to ill health. And I think it's important to know that our bid was commended on the maturity of our partnership arrangements, our track record in delivering other similar programmes such as Working Win, our strong links to our communities and a high degree of strategic alignment. So as you recall from our bold ambitions in the integrated care strategy, this is fundamentally addressing that. Next slide, please. So just to remind of the overarching objectives for Work Well. Objective 1 is to deliver a holistic work and health service. So around early intervention support, light touch holistic support, a single joined up view and gateway into services that are available locally and available to anyone with a disability or health condition who needs to start, stay or continue in work. Objective 2 is to take forward an integrated local work and health strategy. And I think this is really where the strategic alignment does play in very strongly. We have a huge amount of work happening in South Yorkshire in the 4 different places in this space. So drawing all of those strands together into a single integrated work and health strategy will be really important. And then objective 3 is to be part of a national learning programme. So one of the benefits of being a vanguard is that we are part of now a community of practice, and we have support from national and regional teams in this. So I'm going to hand now to Tina, who can just update on a bit of the detail around that.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. So I think it's really important to note as well with this provision that this will actually help us to join up services locally. It's not adding more into a fragmented service. It will actually help us to streamline the provision that we already have across the region. It will act as a single gateway, a triage and referral pathway as well into other services and provision, so making sure that each of the services are working collectively together. The service model that you can see on screen has been co-designed with stakeholders, including the voluntary community sector and participants as well that access this services, to ensure that we have a model that maximises services and achieves greater impact by working together. So as Christine mentioned, Workwell will offer low intensity support to individuals that have been out of work for up to 3 months, and this is because of their health condition or disability, and then 2 months, so excuse me, and then 2 months support once in work. We will also offer support to those that are in work and struggling because of their health condition, or potentially if the person is off work and receiving a fit note, again because of their health condition. In addition to this, the programme will also offer low intensity support to employers in the terms of occupational health, to support them to recruit or keep people in employment with those health conditions. And again, that might be supporting with adaptations in terms of returning to work. So we will work with our job centre colleagues as well, maximising access to work support, but also just to mention within the integration, this in terms of where we've said an individual will receive support where they've recently come out of work for up to 3 months, that fits within the current structure. So what this does, it actually fills a gap that we've got across South Yorkshire currently. Next slide, please. So to support with the Workwell activity and development of a work and health strategy that Christine mentioned, 2 roles will be created. So we will have a work and health integration lead role, which will be temporary for 12 months. So ICB was successful in applying for funds to enable leadership capacity in this space. And we have an agreement with ourselves, Simca, that we will lead on the recruitment for this post, and it will be situated within the skills team within the authority, and that will help to draw together the wider current strands of work that's in place from other funding streams, so that we can really kind of pull together that work for a new work and health strategy. Just to give an update on that, the job spec is with our HR team currently, but we do intend to go out to recruit for that post within the next few weeks, and that could potentially be a secondment opportunity for somebody from local authority or other health provider colleagues. The other role that I mentioned is named as a learning and change manager, which was outlined in our bid. So this role is funded to the duration of the programme, and will work closely with the work and health integration lead, partners and providers across the region to really raise awareness and drive referrals to Workwell services. As we know, we've shared before, Simca are experienced in delivering work and health programmes, particularly Working Win, and as recognised in our bid. We're also acknowledging further work and health programmes that are coming down the line later this year from the government in terms of universal support. So it's really important that we align those services now and really tailor them locally to make sure that we've got, as you know, services joined up within place. So Simca are working with the ICB as the Commissioner and Contract Performance Manager for this work. So this will be supported by a Memorandum of Understanding with the ICB. So what that will do is that will enable funds to flow between organisations and ensure that roles and responsibilities are clarified. So that is currently being done at the minute between the two organisations. Next slide, please. So looking at the governance structure that was proposed, this is the model that we shared with you previously, and it's what was in our bid. So this structure that is in place will ensure that we're engaging with stakeholders from a strategic level to on the ground working as well, capturing the voice of participants within that structure. So where possible, we've built on existing groups rather than duplicate, because that's absolutely what this is not here to do. The Workwell programme will report into the ICB Oversight Group, which is what Christine chairs and is the Senior Responsible Officer for Workwell. There will also be a new group that is formed as part of this, though, and that's the Multi-Agency Working Group. So what this group will do is it will provide guidance and an operational steer on the programme development and contract activity to really help ensure successful delivery of the programme and outputs in an integrated way. We have got the first meeting scheduled in, and that is for the 9th of July. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, so the Department of Health and Social Care have provided us with a timeline which is shown on this slide. And as you can see, I think the first stage of that for us to respond is to develop our initial delivery plan and submit and get signed off by the 30th of June. However, I think we would really like to be in a position where we can submit and get our initial delivery plan signed off much earlier than this. I think in order for us to progress with procurement activity at pace, I would like us to aim for a start date of the 1st of September. The reasons for that, it aligns with local services that are coming to an end, but also it does allow us a little bit of slippage and a bit of wriggle room, so that if that does happen, we'll still meet within the timescales that the department have set us. Since the award notification, we've been actively working and continue to work with each of our 4 places to ensure that this is taken forward in partnership and builds on the work that has and is taking place across the region. So we do know that we need to do more on this. So if I could ask if there are any stakeholders that colleagues are aware of and would like to ensure that they're involved in this process, please do direct them to either myself or Christine. One thing to add on as well that is, it's separate to Workwell, but it does kind of align with the work that it does, is the Department of Health and Social Care have released a call to ICBs to bid for a proof of concept around employment advisors, and this is within MSK services. So this follows a recent rollout of employment advisors within talking therapies. Our ICB is intending to submit a bid for this call, which will include one of the places, with the potential for us to pilot it in an area and then expand out into other places, within a second tranche, which would be expected in 2025. The idea of that would be that those services again would be referred to participants that are taking part in Workwell services as well. So it's an added value to each other, again, not any duplication. Okay, thank you. That is us. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And by the way, congratulations to the team. I know from other ICB chairs that almost every ICB put a bid in and very few were successful. So it's really good to see South Yorkshire being successful. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much. That is really interesting and well done with all the work that you've done. I was just wondering, I think I asked this question last time as well, whether there is any kind of thought about people who want to be self-employed rather than being employed. Because that is something that I have come across. In fact, just recently I met a woman that set up a collective of women who are all neurodivergent, and how difficult it was for them to find employment, but they've managed to. So I wonder whether that is and there are other examples in Sheffield. I know that I'm sure that there are examples in other parts of the region. It's just an assumption that people are employed, but people may have skills and or want to take charge of their own lives, and they happen to be disabled, etc. So I wonder whether we're looking at that as well.
Yep, thank you very much for that. Absolutely. Self-employment is included with this, and I will make sure it's included within the diagram that we've showed. But yeah, they will be able to access exactly the same support that somebody in employment or looking for employment will be able to access as well. Just to mention that we will be working with, so Launchpad is a UK SPF funded programme that supports people to become self-employed. We will be working with partners delivering that to make sure that obviously they are aware about the service, so we're able to actively refer people in that meet that criteria as well. Okay, thank you.
Two good questions, if I may. Have we got a sense of how many people might be eligible who might benefit from this in South Yorkshire? And then the other question I had was, is there a role for primary care or GPs? Just would have to work with a collaborative if there is. Thank you.
Thank you. So the number of participants that we're looking to support over a 2-year period is 3,750. In terms of a role for GPs and healthcare providers, yes, absolutely. So again, what we will look to do from this is build on the successes that we have seen from Working Win and the relationships that we do have. But like I mentioned earlier, we do know that there is more that we need to do in this space, and any introductions, any support that colleagues could share with us on that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a really fantastic project. I was a big user. Obviously, I'm a CEO of a charity, so from an employer point of view, I think there's not enough support out there for employers. Obviously, you said about the 3-month support while they've been off. I think you're going to have some challenge around actually employers managing that within the 3 months if you're quite restricted on your timings, and equally 2 months whilst in work. You spoke about the assessments. You're going to find that for us, as a charity, certainly, when those adaptations are made, can we physically afford them? Is there going to be financial support? There used to be in a previous programme. I don't know whether that's still the case. Some of the adaptations we've had for some of our employees have been up to £1,500 that we've had to contribute. And for us, that's unaffordable, and we've had to use some of the charitable money to be able to do that, to engage people back. You answered my previous question, the 3.5 million, how long was that for? So that's for 2 years. Again, it's great that these projects start, but it's what happens after that. So for the Working Win, it was great that we had access to occupational help. But as soon as that then ended, we had nowhere to turn. We don't have that support internally that you have in the NHS, that you have in councils. For individual employers, we are basically left on our own, and we're left phoning the doctors, asking for reports. And sometimes we can be waiting 3 months, 4 months, if we ever get one. And I'll be honest, most of the time, no offence, but they're not very helpful. We want to know, what can we do to support them? When is it likely they'll return? And most of the time it's, they're going to be off and we're not sure. And actually, for us as employers, I might have paid up to £120 for that report. So that was a really helpful service. They gave me really meaningful reports that we could work with. And obviously then it's down to the employee wanting to engage to actually come back. So
it is. Thank you so much for that. So in terms of the reports, that is a part of the service that Workwell will look to offer. I would really value a conversation outside of this meeting with you, if that's okay, just to get a bit more of an insight from your perspective. In terms of I suppose the timescales or the criteria that we've set for somebody that's out of work for 3 months, that is actually something we've set as partners. There hasn't been a timescale put on that from the department, but it's actually what we've tried to do is really make sure that this is clear to providers and to people that are accessing the service. There is and will be other support that's available for people who need more longer term and more higher intensity support. So actually, if there's a participant that presents with some health conditions or employment challenges that potentially couldn't be resolved within the timescale we've got within the low intervention service, this programme can triage for that more higher intensity support from a more specialist provider.
Sorry, can I just ask as well? And I'm cheeky asking another one. Does it include volunteering as well? So for people that have been out, because at the moment I'm engaging with someone to do a supported internship.
Yeah.
So does it include involving people back into work, including volunteering?
Yeah, I suppose it can do. What we will look to do is, I think social prescribers play a big role in this as well. I know volunteering is part of that support offer. So we will absolutely look to kind of work with partners in that space. But this programme is meant competitive work, yeah. So we can definitely triage and support and make sure that that person's got the right support to get them back into, whether it's a volunteering opportunity that then could lead into competitive employment. But yeah, it's making sure that that right support is there for that person.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just building on that, I've got a question about the this accelerated time period and the amount of time to procure. I think it's really important in the kind of the desire to move fast and to get moving, because I can understand why you've chosen to do it that way, that we really kind of clear about what's going to make a real impact when you get to the other side of delivery. And I know from a number of employment and skills programs that particularly wanting to reach people who do fall through the net in terms of what's already there, having people doing that delivery who have got existing relationships is massive. It will make such a huge difference, because I know that when we've had organisations shipped in from outside, you have like a year time lag on actually getting moving with some of that. So I think we do need to kind of learn lessons from, what we know works around that.
I absolutely agree with that. And one thing that we are doing, just so everybody is aware, so in each of the 4 local authority areas, there's we have a local integration board. So local providers are very much part of the conversations that we've been having with at each place to make sure that they're aware and well informed, as well as to kind of what's happening, again, to give them kind of a good opportunity to input into this. Thank you.
Gina, Christine, thank you. And again, congratulations. Really, really good news that this is coming to South Yorkshire. And I do know from personal experience how competitive this was. Right, Julia, Emma, welcome to talk about cancer. Who's doing it first?
Yeah, I think it's me. Thank you, Chair. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Emma Latimer. I'm the Executive Place Director for Sheffield. I'm also the Senior Responsible Officer for Cancer across South Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. Do you want
So Julia Jessup, Managing Director for South Yorkshire and Bassett Law Cancer Alliance.
Okay, so thanks very much for your time this morning. We've just got a brief presentation. Really, it's just to inform you of some of the work we've been doing since we brought cancer here. I think it was last July where we talked about using a behavioural approach to tackle inequality across South Yorkshire, in recognition that cancer outcomes are particularly poor, particularly in the early diagnosis. And one of the joint forward plan ambitions of achieving the 75% of cancers diagnosed at stage 1 or 2 by 2028 is hugely challenging. We are way off it. There are huge inequalities across South Yorkshire. We know cancer will continue to increase in terms of the rates of incidence. 1 in 2 of us will get it. So it's an absolute thing we have to focus on. So in terms of the Cancer Alliance, we're really trying to work with the with SIMCA to try and, I suppose, spread the awareness of cancer, but also really to get a South Yorkshire brand behind it, because there's lots of national campaigns, but we want something that's really South Yorkshire focused. So it's intended that we talk to you today about our South Yorkshire Shows Up for Cancer brand. That will provide an overarching umbrella brand for our strategic plan for cancer. And the foundation of the strategy will be based on 5 bold ambitions. It's intended to engage with a wide range of partners to establish pledges outlining the different organisational contributions to the ambition. So we're looking particularly at education. Where can we influence children, their families in this? Employers in terms of getting people tested, trying to look at time to test pledges, and we'll come on to that. And how can we as an NHS and our partners really do more to encourage people to go for testing and to start working with our communities in a different way across the 4 places. Again, building on the work that's already done. This isn't about, you know, throwing everything, all the good work that's going on, but actually having a really brand that we can all kind of get behind and attach ourselves to. So that's really the overarching purpose of the report. Julie will just take you through the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions in terms of what next. So thank you.
Thanks, Emma. So the first slide just shows the brand that we've come up with. And as Emma alludes to, what we want to do is make sure that we work through each of our places to complement. We know that there are public health campaigns that are being developed locally in each of the places. So it's not to cut across that, but what we want to the point where if people in South Yorkshire here shows up, it triggers cancer. And so it's a bit of a social movement and call to action as an umbrella across the work that we know that is already going on at place. Next slide, please, Mags. Thank you. So again, it's a communication and engagement approach, and what we're wanting to do is make sure that this sets out the strategic plan that we are developing, which has 5 bold ambitions on cancer. Next slide, please. So this just takes us where we've got to in terms of describing those bold ambitions, and we want to make sure that these are not just health and social care ambitions, but they're something that everybody can get behind, and as Emma said, pledge towards what's our skin in the game in being able to deliver this for the population of South Yorkshire. So the first thing is, I think, making sure that we do recognise cancer and treat it as a long-term condition. So 1 in 2 of us will get cancer. We know that it's a disease of the elderly. So how do we really make sure that everybody owns cancer? I think we've got a bit too good at making it too specialist. So making sure that cancer is everybody's business, and really training particularly the clinical staff in being able to have personalised conversations around what does it really mean for you to be having treatment and get personalised care into the way that we approach cancer. The second ambition is around really making sure that we participate in cancer preventative measures, so making sure that South Yorkshire achieves the national average in all of the preventative measures. We know 3.5 cancers in South Yorkshire could be prevented if we do that. The third ambition is really about closing the gap. So we know particularly in the common cancers, the highest incidence is in the most deprived groups. So how do we narrow that gap between the most deprived and the least deprived through real targeted prevention? So working through the communities and making sure that we do engage those people that don't normally engage in some of those activities. The fourth ambition is the one that we've described in the joint forward plan. So how can we do more around vaccination, screening, case finding to really make sure that we are diagnosing cancers earlier and improving the outcomes? And then the final ambition is building on all the previous ones, but also how do we make sure that we've got the best access to effective treatment? We are doing research well, and we're making South Yorkshire a place where people want to come and work. So we know we've got workforce issues in South Yorkshire. So how do we do that and really make sure that we reduce the number of deaths in people under age 75 because we've got the best treatments? Next slide, please. So this is just some examples of what we mean by showing up. So doing our bits as individuals and organisations to help with early diagnosis. We've mentioned about making sure it's a long-term condition, doing the actions that lead to prevention. Next slide, please. So as an initial focus, as part of the strategic plan, we want an 18-month 18-month plan to kickstarters. And so the area that we've really focused on doing some work initially is with screening. So hopefully people have seen and heard the Peace of Mind campaign that's already going on at the moment. That will come under the Shows Up umbrella. But one of the areas that we really want to, as Emma has alluded to, have a look at is how do we really educate and get learning packages into schools so that children are aware of those signs and symptoms, they understand the importance of prevention, and how do we work work with employers on things like giving time to test, or at least improving access around time to test for screening. So there's some of the areas that we're really going to be focusing on, but over the overarching strategy will tackle a lot more than that. That is just the initial focus. So I think final slide, please. Oh no, these are just some of the examples that we say around as we get people and broader partners engaged, some of the pledges that we might want people to bring. So we're doing an engagement event where we really want people to think about what is it that we can bring to this from our perspective. And so the final slide, please, is just when we did have an engagement event set up for the 4th of July. That was
something else,
really,
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes,
Couldn't
it
have timed
might
it
be a little
better.
bit busy on that day
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So we've got provisionally on hold in Oliver's diary the 12th of July now. We're really keen that we do this work in July and don't put it back to September. So really it was just to brief everybody on the work that we've been doing since we last came to see you in July across the broader partnerships. For you to consider, give any comments around the ambitions and the way forward. We are doing the refresh of the joint forward view plan, so just permission from everybody that we embed these bold ambitions into that plan, and just I suppose permission to keep you cited on the work, and we want the ownership of this partnership group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It sounds like, you know, it's a no-brainer in terms of wanting to have kind of oversight over all of South Yorkshire. I sound a bit like a broken record, but in terms of, we've talked about a lot about data, and obviously we are looking at inequalities and inequalities of outcomes from people from certain groups. So I'm wondering whether there will be a, you know, special kind of different kind of campaigning for certain groups. So for example, the most disadvantaged, are we looking at postcodes and what the outcomes is, not in the, you know, in the screening, but also the final outcome is for people from certain groups. And also I'm very, very interested in learning disability and that kind of how the screening goes for those people, especially those that have low capacity, and what their outcomes and their expectancy of actually of positive outcomes is, because I know that they are well down there. So are we looking at that at the outset rather than picking it up late?
So yes, so the whole strategy is underpinned around how do we address inequalities. So building on the behavioural science work that we've already started. So we absolutely understand where those postcodes are, where we've got late stage presentation, and we're actively doing work through the places in those areas. So this has got to be about working in communities. That's the only way we're going to shift the dial and do things differently. So we have all of that information. We understand which are the ethnic groups that are most likely to get the certain types of cancers. So all of that will be built into the targeted approach that we're doing. And in terms of learning disability, we're doing some specific work in cervical cancer. So our Nudge the Odds campaign, which is our behavioural science, has done some specific targeted work to really understand what are the barriers that are in process at the minute that are stopping people coming forward. So using those learning insights to redesign and improve the services. So we've had some very positive results from that. So people being able to engage better. So we can share some of that information, but yeah, it's absolutely inbuilt into the approach.
Thank you. It's a comment really, and then one little appeal at the end. Loved what you were saying about getting dug into communities. You know, we know which communities where we've got the biggest problems. As Angela said, I'm going to be a broken record too. It wouldn't be the ICP if I didn't raise it, but about funding the left shift. Cancer is a place where we know some people are over treated. And I just wanted to flag up that whilst you're talking about working in communities, totally support it. We've had some amazing results in Sheffield of what we find out when we have community champions working in communities. We're now unfunding the community champions because we've got no money. If you read the case studies, it is so impressive what these people do. You know, picking up on isolated people, a woman looking sad sitting on the swings. Oh, well, you know, those are the approaches that we know work, but we're not funding them. I'm looking at you, Julia, because I'm meeting your eye. That's not an accusation. It's for this room to say, what, you know, when are we? And the other thing was just an appeal about the event. High level leadership, we keep committing to ensuring that the people that suffer the worst of this are in the meetings at the beginning, and then we don't do brilliantly at it all the time. So I just want to say there's an event on the 12th of July. Can we just be really, really careful that representatives of, or the people who are really suffering these outcomes are in that meeting? It's not just a workshop for how the system responds to, because we've made commitments to people in communities, and we're not doing as well as we could do, I think.
So just to respond to that last bit, I think the engagement event is around really bringing in the broader partnership. How are we getting to our local communities, engaging locally? We're doing that with Place. So we are doing separate events in each of the places as well. So that one is more around how do we make this a much broader ambition beyond health and social care, just so that you're cited on that bit.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously.
So thank you, Julia. I just wanted to remind the board that we have committed to a Tobacco Alliance commitment, and I think, you know, that's our prevention arm of, you know, preventing people getting cancers in the first place. I think second thing is to reinforce that the earlier that people are picked up with cancer, their chances of survival increase. So that's why we want to go really from screening onwards. And, you know, we need to have some hope, and the hope and actually more people are surviving from cancer. So we need to remind ourselves of that actually within that disease modality, we are making successes. Now, I'd hope that people didn't get cancer. They will do. So our services are there and more people are benefiting from them. Thank you.
And just to come back on that though, I mean, obesity is one of the biggest issues again that's linked. And so in terms of going into schools, you know, and talking to children about, you know, obesity and some of those things are going to, I think, may overtake smoking in the future. So again, that's why we're trying to make it a bit broader. But coming back to your point, Eleanor, you know, this work is going to be tied into the work we're already doing with our most deprived communities. It's not something separate. So we just need to make sure, you know, if community champions are the thing that, again, that needs to be brought into the Place work that we're doing, and happy to have that discussion with the other Place directors. Okay.
That's really helpful, and I do keep forgetting about that today for some reason. I think it's his cough. I do think that's what it is. But I do think this is a really good project, and I was really keen to link into this, and particularly the care sector, how we could do that early help and training. I think because that is, you know, I think Sheffield, that's a 16,500 of a workforce that could be really in communities and actually talking about actually how do we, you know, not only spot signs earlier, but actually prevent harm and enable people to live good lives.
I completely agree with Alexis about the care sector. You know, I employ care support because we're going into people's own homes, vulnerable people, and often it links into my other point. People are really busy, and it's often people that are caring that their health is left last. So I love the fact that the time to test I think that concept's amazing. I think it's just about getting your buy-in from the employees to give them time, whether they have paid time to go and they actually, it becomes almost an event for me again as an employer. We have to create events like the whole menopause event. Right, that's a focus for that month. That's what we're going to commit to. So I think it's how you're going to get the buy-in for the employees. But I think if, as soon as you do that, people have to make time for it because the employers are giving them time to do it. I think as soon as people have so many commands on the personal time, it's often the last thing that's left. So, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, because I really do think our bold ambition around recognising and valuing our entire workforce, paid or unpaid, that's 320,000 plus people and population in South Yorkshire. So I think that's a bold ambition in the strategy. You've got your bold ambitions about this. We could do some targeted work, which would also include the care sector. So I think it's fantastic links we're coming.
I don't think we really use our own stat and our care stat anywhere near enough.
No, just to thank you for your comments, and we'll reflect those back. And I think that the time to testing is really important, and trying to get employers to either pay or at least, you know, give people proper time off is hugely important in the inequality space. So we will be really working hard on that in Sheffield and beyond. Thanks.
Julia, Emma, thank you very much. 12 o'clock. We have finished on time. Thank you very much for your attendance. Good to see you, and we'll see you again soon. Look after yourself. Safe journey. Thank you.